Hi, this is Joe Chambers, Chambers Custom, and 1911 University, bringing you another review today. This is a review that many of you have been waiting anxiously to see me do. It is of Night Fighter number 13. And this gun was built and delivered in August of 2019. The owner sent me a nice letter to go along with it, telling me that he shot approximately 30,000 plus rounds through the gun. Those of you who have read the white paper saw that most of it is, it's high quality ammo. Speer Lawman, 124 and 147 grain, HST, 124 grain gold dot. And primarily he used ALG Go Juice or CLP as the lubricant and cleaner for the gun. The pistol was used in classes with Pat Mack, Chuck Pressburg, Kyle DeFord, Don Edwards, Steve Fisher, Mike Pannone, Dan Eibach, and Bill Delaporte. It was used in USPSA, IDPA, two-gun, and outlaw competitions, and it has engaged appropriate size targets from 0 to 200 yards without fail during that 30,000 plus rounds of firing. The gun came in from our friend Joe, who owns it and has owned it since the very beginning. Many of you know him. You've seen his videos on YouTube showing him shooting it, showing his reviews of the gun. It was originally DLC coated, and you can see here in the video that the DLC has worn off on the sides of the slide. Some of that is from holster wear, some of that is just from cycling the gun like it was intended to be cycled over the top like that. So anyways, let's go through the numbers right quick and take a look at where the gun was and where it is now and how it's changed a little bit. And then we'll talk about some of the things that we didn't get to talk about in the white papers that I know you're all interested in. So as we begin, let's remember math don't lie. 3.14 is always pi. All right, let's start off with the barrel. We're going to talk about the front end of the gun. The bushing OD and ID, the barrel OD and a bushing ID. It looks like, originally this gun left here with 3/4 of a thousandths tolerance because it's a DLC gun. It has to be a little bit looser, and it opened up to 1.5 thousandths tolerance. You'll see how that comes into play when we talk about the barrel leg fit. When you lose tolerance up front, then the barrel becomes looser, obviously, in the front end of the gun, so you lose tolerance in the back end of the gun, and you lose some of your barrel fit in the back. The slide ID to bushing OD, again, this gun left here with about 2/10 of a thou tolerance between those two measurements, and he's up to right at 1,000, so he lost a little over 3/4 of a thousandths. That happens when you clean the gun, because you're taking the bushing in and out of the gun, and so you're wearing that surface, that interface between the bushing and the slide, and it's just a natural course of action that you're going to lose a little bit of tolerances there. The bushing moves fore and aft in the slide 0, which is excellent. That's what we want to see. The barrel hood to breech face gap. So you guys know when we ship these guns out, they have less than 1,000ths tolerance on the breech face gap typically. That's what we aim for. You can go up to 2 to 2.5 thou tolerance before you start losing appreciable accuracy. By appreciable accuracy, what do I mean? I mean, starting at 1/4 to 3/8 to 1/2 inch at 50 yards. It's really not that much, as most of us can't notice 1/4 to 1/2 or even 1 inch at 50 yards because we can't shoot a 1 or 1.5 inch group at 50 yards. But what it does affect is as the hood gap gets bigger, it affects the amount of wear that the barrel induces on the slide lugs. So we like to keep that as tight as possible. Well, what I've seen over the years is the hood gap will open up some as the round count goes up, and it typically stops right there around 4 thousandths and doesn't get much bigger. And it can be one of two things. It can be that the breech face is being peened back, or it can be that the lugs have been slightly peened forward and final settled. In extreme cases of very high round count guns, you will see the breech face actually get beat back, and you'll see a ring develop around where the round is going off. This gun doesn't show any signs of that, fortunately. So we're at 4 thousandths on the hood gap. Not a huge deal. It can be easily corrected if need be, but we probably won't correct it. We'll probably just leave it as it is. Chamber depth still at 756. Slide stop pinhole in the frame is at 201, which is what it was when it left here. The slide stop diameter is at 198.5, which is half a thousandths less than when it left here. So the slide stop did wear a little bit, but the frame didn't, which is exactly what we want to see. The cheapest part wears out first, not the most expensive part. The extractor length was 2.230 with approximately 5 thousandths fore and aft movement. That also is not a surprise with a gun of this high round count, simply because you get more movement fore and aft the higher round count you go, because the firing pin plate, which again is the weakest part, gets beat into submission by the hammer. And no doubt this gun, not only does it have 30,000 plus rounds through it, but it also has, I don't know, I would harbor a safe guess to say it has at least 10,000 dry fires. And so every time that hammer drops, it's pounding that firing pin plate, which is getting adjusted, and so the extractor starts to move fore and aft. Now, some of you might be asking, well, Joe, why does this one have a 2.230 extractor instead of your standard 2.245? Well, the reason is because the breech face length, the disconnector rail length on this particular gun was a little bit shorter. So we shortened it up so that the hook would be in the right location on the case. And that's perfectly acceptable. That's part of building a custom gun, is being able to measure the parts as you build the gun and adjust them accordingly. You know what your standard specs are, but you also have to go, okay, this one's a little shorter, so I got to make this part, adapt, and so it's got to be a little bit shorter to adapt. So that's why that's the way it is. Ejector wasn't changed at all, except for it's a little bit loose in the frame, and that's indicative of the owner of the pistol using 170 and 140 millimeter mags, and when he puts the mag in the gun, he hits it hard, boom, and the bottom of the ejector gets hit. There's no way to prevent that. The bottom of the ejector gets hit by the magazine, and over time doing that, it causes it to loosen up. Again, it's an easy fix. We'll have our buddy Darren weld up the pinhole where the ejector goes. We'll recut it and put it back in place. No big deal. Barrel legs. 10% barrel leg contact on this gun. And, the gun left here with 100% or darn near 100% contact on the barrel legs. The owner shot multiple targets, 25 yards that were 108, 109, 107Xs, which is indicative of good accuracy. So why do we have 10% barrel leg contact? Well, a couple reasons. Number one, because the bushing is now worn out. It's out of spec, right? It's out of spec to the barrel, and it's out of spec to the slide. Number two, the slide stop is worn out. So the slide stop's lost a little bit of its tolerance. The slide stop might be okay if we fit a new bushing and it's exactly right. Very good possibility the slide stop is totally fine. If it's not, we'll just replace the slide stop. No big deal. The slide stop hole in the link is 0.208. And that's important because that's what it left here as, which means that the link didn't stretch. And so what does that mean to you? Well, what that means is if we go on down the measurements and we look at the frame vertical impact surface on this gun was 586 and the barrel vis measured 583. That means that we had the perfect timing and space between the vertical impact surface and the barrel to stop the barrel's rearward movement, thus making it not stop on the link, thus preventing the link from stretching, thus keeping the gun in time properly. That makes for a longer lasting gun. Barrel leg height was still at 100, which is what it was when it left here, so the barrel legs haven't gotten beaten up. There was no signs of barrel bump. The link bridge thickness was 97.5 for a difference of 2.5 thousandths, which was exactly what it was when it left here. The slide to frame fit is really what's one of the most interesting parts of this gun to me. The gun was DLC'd, so it had a little different tolerances. It had stainless steel tolerances of a 1/2 thou side to side and just a little bit over 2 thousandths up and down when it left here. The side to side fit opened up to almost 1 thousandths. So he gained basically, we'll call it a 1/2 thou side to side during the 30,000 rounds. And it opened up a full 1 thousandths up and down. Okay, that's not unexpected, to be totally honest with you. I would expect to see some sort of wear like that in a gun that's shot this much. But it's still tighter than all of the factory brand new or semi-custom or custom brand new guns that we've measured so far on 1911 University. So we'll get into why that is here in a minute. The trigger parts, the trigger pull measures 3¼ pounds, and we went out of here at 3½ pounds, but the owner did change the grip and fit the original trigger to the new grip. So that does play into it and have an effect. The Disco originally was 1.3025, and it's now 1.298, so that's a difference of 4½ thousandths. The reason is because it's rubbing on the slide constantly. So it's going to shorten up naturally. It's still within the spec, the proper length spec for a disconnector, so no need to change that. The sear originally left here at 781, and it came back in at 779.5. So, you know, he lost 1.5 thou on the sear. Again, there's a lot of trigger pulls here, 40,000, at least 40,000 trigger pulls. You're gonna have some wear on the sear and the disconnector. The hammer was perfectly fine. The trigger feels good. No complaints there. Heck, it might even be a little bit smoother than when it left here in the first place because the parts are truly mated together now. Now let's talk about the gun and some of the other intricacies of it. One of the things that I notice over the years when I'm looking at guns that have been shot a bunch, 30,000 is a bunch, you know, 30,000 rounds in 21 months, that's a lot of shooting. That's a lot of time on the gun. That's a lot of practice. It's a lot of dry fire. That's a lot of money nowadays. Think about how much 9mm is going for. I just looked on Gunbroker this morning. It's selling for $1,100 for a case of 115 grain ball, 1,000 rounds. So there's a lot of time and money invested in this gun. One of the things I notice on guns that get a high round count right out of the gate is what the barrel looks like on the inside. For years and years I was told by friends of mine in the industry and military teams that were gunsmiths that they would only get 12 to 15,000 rounds of match grade accuracy out of a barrel. I found out later that the reason for that was because they were shooting stainless barrels, and stainless barrels don't hold up as well as carbon steel barrels like we use that are made by CART. When I started evaluating and paying attention and keeping track of the carbon steel barrels, what I found out was the reasonable expected barrel life in a gun, a 9mm or 45 that's shooting just jacketed bullets, is around 65,000 rounds. Match accuracy is slightly less than that. By the time you get to 65,000 rounds, you're going to see, you're going to have shots that are just simply off call. You shoot a shot and you're like, well, I didn't shoot that shot, but you did, you know, and it's totally out of your wobble zone. It's because the barrel's getting worn out. So when we looked at this barrel here in Night Fighter number 13, what we noticed was there is slight throat erosion, and you'll notice when you look at a barrel that has really high round count that the throat erosion actually begins to get really heavy on the top side of the barrel. These are right-hand twist barrels, and so when the bullet leaves the casing and it starts into the rifling, it's spinning high like that, and so the top of the rifling, the lands and grooves, gets worn first. And on this particular gun, there's probably about, I don't know, it's hard to measure, but somewhere between 125 and 200 thousandths of throat erosion beginning to occur. The lands and grooves are not as crisp and sharp as they were when the barrel was brand new, which again, 30,000 rounds is a lot of bullets. So, you know, are we going to replace the barrel in this gun? I don't think so. I think we'll let it ride and put a bushing in it, possibly put a slide stop in it. We'll tweak some of the trigger parts just to clean them up because the sear does get beat up over time. But you know, we'll tweak that a little bit and we'll let it ride because I want to see this barrel again at 60,000 or 65,000 when it probably is ready to be replaced, and we'll get to take a good look at it. Might even take the barrel and put it in the mill and do a cross section of it just to show you what it looks like, you know, a gun that has that many rounds through it. So yeah, that's one of the things that I noticed right off the bat. Christoph asked on the Patreon thread, you know, what what kind of slide to frame looseness does it have? You know, is it rattly? You know, a lot of times you guys can hear me shake a gun. There's no noise coming from this gun when I'm shaking it. The slide to frame fit movement is very, 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 very slightly noticeable. It is not like some of the other ones. You know, the Night Bird of Prey that I did a couple weeks ago, that gun was noticeably loose. The formerly known as with a comp, that gun was noticeably loose. You could hear them in the video, me shaking them. Obviously the Colt was noticeably loose. But when you're talking about tolerances opening up by a half thou or a thou over original, that's not very much. That's really not very much tolerance difference. It is for precision accuracy, but for a gun that's been shot 30,000 rounds, it's not that much. It's really quite impressive, to be honest with you. And so what does that mean, you know, to the guy wanting to buy a gun? Well, here's what it means. I've told you guys multiple times in videos, in live chats, in Q&As over the years. You've seen me post it on forums. The whole adage of buy once, cry once, right? Buy quality the first time, and it'll last. And that's what we see here in this gun, in this Night Fighter, is a good example of buy once, cry once. Guy buys a gun, and arguably the Night Fighters were the best bang for the buck that you could get at the time from Chambers Custom. I mean, these guns were like $5,500 out the door, and you know, now he's 30,000 rounds in, and he doesn't need a complete rebuild. He needs a couple of tweaks. He needs a couple of tune-ups here, you know, a new bushing. It's like $50 for a bushing, whatever. Maybe a slide stop. It's like 75 bucks for a slide stop, whatever. You know, I'll tweak the trigger up for nothing because I like the guy. He's my friend. So, you know, he bought a gun that was quality. It was built right. And so over the long term, the gun didn't wear out. A lot of these guns, guys, that I've measured for you, that I've done reviews on, and I've got more in the safe, and I've got more coming to me. A lot of these guns that I've done reviews on, right out of the box, they need major work. They need tune-ups. Some of them need new barrels. Some of them need all new trigger jobs. You know, maybe the parts are good for the triggers. Most of the time they are, because a lot of these semi-custom shops or custom shops are just putting drop-in parts in. But you know, so you can tweak those trigger parts and make them work good. But as far as slide to frame fit, man, if you've got 2 or 3 or 4 thousandths, you probably need to be thinking about having the gun accu-railed or welded up or just shooting it as it is. A lot of these guns, all these guns that we've looked at, for the most part, they don't have a barrel fit. Well, they're fit up in such a way that there's no way to get a barrel fit without putting a new barrel in. So, you know, you buy quality, and long term it's going to pay off because you're going to have less headaches, you're going to have less wear and tear. And that's another thing, you know, to talk about is guns that are fit loosely get loose faster. And you're like, well, what are you talking about, Joe? Well, if I've got 2 pieces of metal that are fit, precision fit, and they're tight, and they're precise tolerances, and they're moving like this, they're going to have less wear and tear over time than a gun that has tolerances like this, and I'm exaggerating, of course, you know, for scale, and those parts are moving together like this. These parts are going to wear out faster than the parts that are moving like this. And so, you know, in a gun like a Chambers Custom Fat WMG or a Pro Series gun, or one that I build myself, or a regular WMG that guys build, where you can't feel anything but fore and aft movement in the slide to frame fit, that gun is going to last a long, long time. You're gonna be happy with that gun for years to come. And 10 years down the road, for most of us that don't shoot as much as this gentleman does, 10 years down the road, when you've got 10 or 15 or 20,000 rounds through the gun, and you pull it out and you're showing your buddies, or you're at the range shooting a class, and people are looking at it and they're like, wow, that thing's really tight after all these years. You have a lot of pride of ownership, and you have a lot less headaches to worry about when you take it to the range. That's it for today. That's Night Fighter number 13. You know, full-on mathematical review. You know, I love the numbers because the math don't lie. Thanks for following me on Patreon. Thanks for following me on Instagram and Facebook. If you'd like to learn more about Chambers Custom Pistols, you can find us at chamberscustom.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at the same. And until next time, remember, keep calm and shoot on.